Hello, my name is Dennis, and welcome to my trailer park white trash mobile home kitchen. I really do live in a mobile home, in a trailer park, and this is my kitchen. I thought what I would do for this video is a dessert because I've never done a dessert before. Usually I do savory dishes. This is kind of a fancy dessert. I don't know how to describe it. It's relatively easy, but it's also relatively difficult. It's Roma Cheesecake. A lot of you know what cheesecake is. American cheesecake is made with cream cheese. This is made with ricotta cheese. And the first time I ran across this recipe, I thought, ricotta cheese? Because I'm used to using it in something like lasagna, in a savory dish. But actually sweetened ricotta cheese is very common in Italian desserts. So that's what we're going to make today. I don't know where I got this recipe from. Most of the time when I write a recipe, I like to quote the source, and all I had written at the top of the recipe was created from something seen on TV. I don't know whether I was watching a cooking show or Dukes of Hazzard, but I ended up with this recipe, so here we go. Let's get into our ingredients for this recipe. I have my ingredients here divided into two batches because these are going to be for the crust and these are going to be for the filling. So for the crust, you're going to need 3 cups of flour, 6 tablespoons of sugar, 2 tablespoons of water, 1/2 teaspoon of salt, and then I have 2 large eggs. I'm going to be using 1 teaspoon of anise flavoring. I didn't bother to measure that yet. I'll do that when I'm ready to use it. And then I have 3/4 cups of butter. The butter and the eggs are at room temperature, and that'll make more sense when I go to combine the crust ingredients. And then for the filling, I'm going to be using 32 ounces of ricotta cheese. I'll be drying this out a little bit. I'll show you how that's done. I have 1/3 of a cup of granulated sugar, 3 large eggs, one of which will be separated. And then I'll be using 1 teaspoon of vanilla extract, 1/2 cup of sliced almonds, and then for my citrus fruit, 1 orange, 1 lemon, and 1 lime. So those are the ingredients for our recipe. Let's get into draining the ricotta. I find that ricotta cheese right out of the container is a little too wet for my use in this kind of a recipe because I want a fairly firm filling. I don't want it to be too soupy or too wet. So what I do with ricotta is I drain out some of the water or draw off some of the water with paper towels. I'll put 3 layers of paper towels down. See if I can get these arranged nicely, and then just put my ricotta cheese on there. It comes right out. You can see the water in there already. I want to get rid of some of that water. So I'm just going to spread this down onto the paper towel. I've done this so many times, I just know how it works. This works very well. And then 3 more layers of paper towel. And I just put this on the top and press it down. And these paper towels will absorb the liquid. I can already see the liquid starting to come through. All right, I'm going to set that aside for a good 15-20 minutes while I'm making the dough, and that will wick off the moisture from the paper towel, from the ricotta cheese. This is a very simple dough. In a large bowl, I'm going to combine my flour and my sugar and just mix these together. And then in this smaller bowl, I want to put my eggs, the salt, and the water, and get these mixed together first. The salt will actually help to break up that egg a little bit. And then I'm going to put 1 teaspoon of anise flavoring in there. This is optional. I think the anise flavoring gives it a little bit more of an Italian flavor. Get that blended in. That white that you see, that milkiness, that's from the alcohol. And then I'm going to put my butter in there. This is the reason why you want room temperature butter and room temperature eggs. Because if my eggs were cold and or the butter was cold, the butter wouldn't break up in this step. So what I want to do is I want to break this butter up into small beads with my whisk. That'll help it distribute much more evenly in the dough. And that, because everything is at room temperature, that broke up very easily. So if you look at closely there, you can see how the butter has all been broken up into small beads. That's what you're looking for, and again, that will help it to distribute a lot more easily when we put it in the dough. All right, so now I want to combine the butter, the wet ingredients with the dry ingredients. And then I'm just going to mix this with a spatula. This will look pretty broken up. It won't look like dough at all once this starts going. And you'll think, oh gosh, that's not going to work. Okay, so that looks like almost like cornmeal. It's all broken up. Now get my hands in there and start bringing this together. Okay, once you get it to this stage where it's all together, then just bring this all out and then just start kneading this until it's smooth. And that only takes a moment or two. I don't want to overwork this. I just want to bring it together so that it's smooth. And that looks pretty good right there. I'm not seeing any balls of flour. So I'm going to wrap this in plastic wrap and set that aside, clean up my mess here, and then we'll be able to start working with the filling. So I want you to see, before I use that bowl, I want you to see what the ricotta looks like after it's been draining. This doesn't stick to the paper towels like you might think it would. It just lifts right off. These paper towels are soaked with liquid now. So there is our ricotta, somewhat firmer than it was before because I got all the liquid out, or not all of it, but a lot of the liquid out. All right, so there's our ricotta cheese in our bowl. And then I want to add the sugar. Where's my sugar? Here's the sugar. 2 eggs. And as I mentioned earlier, I'm going to divide one of these eggs. And I'm saving this egg white for garnishing the top. I'm going to make an egg wash out of that for the top. So I want 1 teaspoon of vanilla in there. Okay. And then you can combine this if you want in a mix using an electric mixer or using a stand mixer. I'm just so used to reaching for a spoon that this is what I do. I just start with a spoon. This is the beginning of our filling. And get this all combined. You can see how easily that combines. I don't know that I would need to do that in a mixer. I mean, it only takes seconds to mix all that together. Okay, so there's that. First of all, I'm going to start off by zesting the fruit. I'm just taking these ends off because it makes it a little bit easier for me to get to the rind. That one I don't need to do. And then I've got a microplane that I use for zesting. I use all of the lemon and the lime. These microplanes make it very easy to do this. The idea is just to get the colored part off of the citrus. All right, that's enough of that. So there's our lime. And then I'm going to do the lemon. I'm not going to be as fussy with the lemon because it's larger. This is going to be more than enough to provide the zest that I want. Okay, so there's our lemon zest. And then finally, just part of the orange, maybe half of the orange, because there's so much zest here. I don't want to have the colors out of balance. So that's good enough. There's our 3 lemon zests, our 3 citrus zests there. I'm going to set that aside, and then I'm going to start juicing half of the orange and the lemon and the lime. I want to get the juice out of, as I mentioned, my lemon, my lime, and half my orange. What I like to do is get in there with a fork and really pierce that fruit well so that when I squeeze, it doesn't squeeze all over the kitchen and all over me. You can get your fingers in there and really squeeze that juice out. I'm still getting it on the counter, but I'm going to get enough in here that it's going to work very well. I have a little sieve in here to catch the pulp and the seeds because they are going to come out. And then I'm only using half the orange because just as I didn't want the orange zest to predominate in the filling, I don't want the orange flavor to predominate either. So I'm just going to use most of this orange juice, but not all of it. Okay, that's probably going to be good enough right there. And then finish draining that. And there is the juice that's going to be the flavoring for inside of the cheesecake. So our next step then is to combine all these ingredients that we just arranged. So there is my zest. This is the juice from the citrus fruit. And then these are my sliced almonds. I'm going to use most of these, but not all. I'm going to reserve some for garnishing the top. And that should be enough. And then blend all this together. And if you are familiar with baking, I'm sure you're already anticipating how good this is going to taste. And that's how simply that mixes together. So that's our filling. The next thing to do is to start shaping our pie crust. My dough has been resting for a while now, so I'm going to begin working with this. I'm going to divide this into 2 sections, by about say 1/3 and 2/3. I'm going to set that aside. That'll be for the top crust. And then I'm going to show you how easy it is to shape this bottom crust. I don't even use a rolling pin. I will need to dust that dough. I have a duster here that I use. This is actually a duster for powdered sugar, but I use it as a flour duster. I put my hands around the edge as I'm doing this. It helps to prevent it from splitting, because it will split around the edges. I have a rolling pin. I'm so used to doing this with my hands, I just
use my hands to shape this. Okay, so I think I'm about ready here to try to lift this up without tearing it too badly. And then lay it into our spring form pan. If it tears a little bit, it's okay, because when I shape it around the edges here, there we go. Any tearing that has happened is just going to get squeezed right back together again. So you want to ease this into the pan. Make sure that it comes up around the sides. Make sure there's no air pockets inside there. In the bottom. And you can see, without using a rolling pin, that was fairly easy to do. It's whole. There's no tears in there, so I'm satisfied with that. This won't come up to the top, but it'll fill it probably 3/4 of the way full, which is good enough. Okay, and then just kind of smooth this around. And now this part is done. We're ready to start doing the top crust. This is that other third of dough that we put aside. So let me flour this lightly. And for this, piece of plastic in there. For this, I'm just going to roll this or press this into a long rectangle, because I'm going to use this to cut strips to lattice the top. If I do this right, I want the length to be about the width of my spring form pan. And once I get that length right, then I can start shaping this down to form my width. Okay, so I'm about satisfied with that. That should give me the strips that I need. Using a fluted pastry wheel. Trim off that outside edge, and then maybe 1/2 inch to 3/4 of an inch wide, I'm going to cut the strips. It looks like I got just 10 there. That's probably more than enough. All right, so now we're going to start putting these strips on here. Just want to lay these on top. I was afraid that might happen. Just put it in place and working back and forth. I don't mind these pieces on the edge. We're going to cover this extra. Oops. And there's the lattice in place. And the next thing I want to do is I want to just press these in to the dough around the edges, just to make sure that they're well pressed in. It's more the thickness I'm concerned about. I want to get these edges thin, and I'll show you the reason why in a moment. Just going to press that into the edges, into the dough all the way around the edge. Okay. And then what I like to use so that I don't scratch my pan is I trim these off with a little plastic knife, a little picnic knife. Okay. Now we have to make that look nice. So I'm going to go back to my egg wash. I'm going to set this aside. To do my egg wash, this is the egg white that I set aside earlier. And I'm going to put a little bit of water in here, maybe about 2 teaspoons or a tablespoon. And then use a whisk to break this up. that's good enough. Then I've got a pastry brush here. First step I want to do is, and what did I do with my plastic? I'm going to need that, is I want to use my pastry brush and just paint this right around the inside edge of the dough. And you'll see why in just a moment. So all the way around the inside. And then I want to get my knife in there and separate this. And what I want to do is I want to roll this down and then just kind of tuck it in so that we have a nice rounded finished edge around our cheesecake. Kind of give it more of a finished look. Okay, almost done here. Okay. And then, again, I want to use my egg wash and carefully brush just the lattice. I'm trying to avoid the filling, because if I get into the filling, the bristles of the brush will pick it up and lift it up onto my lattice, which I don't want. This will do two things. One is it's going to hold the almonds to the top when I sprinkle those on, when I garnish it, and then it'll also help us to have a more of a browned finished look to it. And then the last step is to sprinkle the almonds on there. I'm going to use my fingers. I think it'll work better. If you don't want to use almonds, you can use coarsely ground sugar like raw sugar. I like to use raw sugar a lot as a garnish. And there is our pie, our cheesecake rather, ready to go into the oven. So I'm going to set the oven to 375 degrees. When it comes up to temperature, I'm going to bake this for 60 to 70 minutes, then bring it out of the oven, let it cool. You want to refrigerate it and serve it cold. So while I'm waiting for my oven to heat, I'm just going to set this aside, and I want to show you what the finished cheesecake is going to look like. I made this yesterday. You can see it's beautifully browned very nicely on the top. The crust is nicely browned. It's a very firm pie. I mean, or cake. It's very, I think, very firm. It'll be easy to cut. So the next thing I want to do is get this on a cutting board and then cut it, and then we can have our dessert. So I'm ready to cut into this. I'm going to cut it in half first, because I think it's a lot easier to cut if I divide it in half and then cut off a sliver of it. Oh, that is just, I can just tell by the way that it's cutting that it's finished nicely. It's a nice solid filling. That'll be a beautiful dessert. So let's go eat some Roma cheesecake. For a printable PDF copy of this recipe with step-by-step photographs, visit the White Trash Cooking website and look on the home page or in the recipe archive.